Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was.
Hello everybody, Naylor1904 here with another review. Today we will be reviewing the Talking Heads Remain in Light album. So this is a 1980 album. Before this album, Talking Heads had made a good amount of albums. They had been making music for 3 years before this album. But the big thing with this album is they got Brian Eno as the producer of this album, and because of that, their music never sounded the same. Before this album, they sounded pretty much a lot like rock, also just alternative, with a little bit of funk, a little bit of African music. The best example was Psycho Killer, where Psycho Killer is pretty groovy, but for the most part, it definitely is an alternative song. But once they got Brian Eno on the production, their music never was the same. It changed. It was completely different. Their music changed from alternative with a little bit of African, a little bit of post-punk to pop, to alternative, to African, to literally everything, to rock, to post-punk, and because of this, Talking Heads kind of got this new sound that they were known for. With the release of this album, this album consists of a lot of just mixes of different beats, of guitar, of bells at some point, kind of electronic music obviously wasn't a thing before this, but this album kind of paved the way for electronic music and how different you could make music sound. Because of that, this is a very influential album, an album that still sounds really good today. This album came out in 1980, like I said, so it's 41 years old, but it still sounds really good, and just has so much funk to it. A lot of groovy sounds, music that you could dance to. The first song is the best example of this. Born Under Punches, The Heat Goes On. Such a funky beat that you would hear from a funk artist like Parliament Funkadelic, James Brown, something like that. But it's a lot different because there's just so much layers to this album, and especially to that first song. There's just so much layers to it. It's very deep. And then you add in David Byrne's vocals and the songwriting, which sounds really weird. Has very weird lyrics. A big theme in this album is government oppression and government control, and just control in general. You see that in the first song, where they talk mainly about government oppression, talking about the government hand. And then the third song, The Great Curve, talks a lot about government control, and talks about kind of women as well, and how the government kind of controls women and makes them kind of follow the way they want them to be. As one of the lines on that song goes, the world moves around a woman's hips. Great songwriting, great storytelling, great, obviously, sound, beats. These instrumentals are insane on this album. They sound really good. And it's just so much. If you listen to it for the first time, you're not going to fully grasp the music. But if you listen to it more and more, you'll catch more and more things. And that's what makes a really great album, is that I can get something out of it by each listen. It's not just listening to the same music. And then once in a lifetime, you have a really big song in the Talking Heads catalog, a really big hit for them. They would become famous for, and it would be considered one of their greatest songs. A song that was actually improvised, as crazy as that might sound. The lyrics were improvised, the songwriting, not the beat. The beat was already decided on, but a very good beat. You know, do, like just a very catchy beat. And then David Byrne's vocals really tells a story. It's kind of like Pink Floyd's Time, and the fact that it talks about how time is passing us by, and we have no control over it. Again, with that control of the album, we have no control over it. There's nothing we can do. Time will pass us by, and it uses the water as an example, as the water will keep on flowing, it'll keep on going, and there's nothing we can do to stop that. It's a very deep song. But it's a very great song, and the guitar at the end is just amazing. The guitar throughout this whole album is also really good and kind of an underrated point of this album. The best example of this is on Crosseyes and Painless, the second track, where the guitar just sounds so good, so fresh, and really just adds, well, once again, like I said, another layer to this album and to that song. And then after the first four tracks, you kind of it takes you to a different direction in Houses in Motion. It's still a little groovy, but it's a little more downhill. As the beginning of this album really is energetic, but once you get to the second part, starting with Houses in Motion, it becomes more calm and kind of more deep. And then you have a song, Seen and Not Seen, probably the weirdest song on this album. Talking about, David Byrne's lyrics is talking about how he wants his facial structure to be like that of what he sees on TV, and how if he changes it in a certain amount of time, he says it'll be short, but then he says 10 years. Very interesting songwriting there, that he will be able to match with a facial expression that'll match his personality. Very weird, very unique music. This is what Talking Heads really became known for. They made weird and they made different music sound really awesome. Just really weird and crazy music, but they made it cool. And that's the thing with Talking Heads. They're really cool. You know, you don't really get that with early Talking Heads. I mean, you kind of do with Psycho Killer, but you know, as their music goes on after this album, you just get that sense of cool. You know, like in songs like This Must Be the Place and She Was, and Nothing But Flowers. You just Wild Wild Life. You just get that really cool, really weird music, but really cool music. It's music that will be played at for parties for a long time, and already have been. And so it kind of takes that kind of like more calmed down, more slower, especially when it hits Listening Wind, the seventh track, and then the Overload as well, the last track. It's just very it's changed a lot from the beginning, and the flow of this album is really good. The fact that it can flow into that, it's not easy for an album to just completely change it on the dime like that and go to very more chilled out music, but Talking Heads do it great, obviously. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing for an album to do, to start on a high note and end on a low note, unless it's like a rock, like Jimi Hendrix or like The Who type album, where, you know, you usually end that on a high energetic note, but typically it's good to end it like that. And they do it really well. And the Overload itself is a song that kind of sounds like Joy Division's I Remember Nothing song on their Unknown Pleasures album. Both songs are really dark, very kind of sad, I guess. Just very dark songs that are very kind of quiet, kind of chilled out a little bit, kind of freaky. And they both end their albums. And Talking Heads was actually kind of trying to do this, but it's weird because they never had heard Joy Division's music, but they said they wanted to make a song like that. Really weird, but really cool, and a great way to end the album. I personally don't care too much for the Overload. I think it's one of the weak spots in the album, but it serves to the album and is a really good ending to the album. And yeah, it's a great album. I definitely recommend it. I give it a 8.6 out of 10. Yeah, tell me if you've seen it or not. Tell me in the comment section what your thoughts were. It's one of my personal favorite albums, and have a good day.